Hello and welcome to India Post Live, India's first live news conversation web TV. And what we're going to discuss today is about the FIFA World Cup that's going to be held in Qatar in 2022. But we're not going to discuss the football angle of it. We're going to discuss the labor issues involved with it. And to discuss that, I have with me Vidya Venkat, who's also a human rights activist and has also done a lot of work on labor issues. We've also got people joining us on Skype. We've got Akash Jayaprakash from Geneva. He's a migration and human rights specialist. And we also have Vani Saraswati, who's the managing editor of Just Here Qatar from Doha, who will be joining us. But before we start the conversation, let's just take a look at the story that we put together on this issue.
It was celebration time in 2010 when the Gulf state of Qatar was announced as host for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. That meant lots more jobs, especially for Indians looking to make a quick buck. But the euphoria was soon over. The last 4 years have seen 974 Indian workers dead on various construction projects.
We're having some technical issue. We'll show you the story later. I'll start with you, Vidya. Basically, the issue is that, the number of people dying has been so high. If you look at India itself, about 1,000 people. And we've seen Indian authorities do nothing about it.
Yes, it's very sad. In fact, this is something that you will see across several sectors where laborers generally are not treated well, especially when it comes to cheap labor, construction workers who work at very low costs. So I would say that, of course, one way of addressing this issue is that the host country, the country to which the people migrate, in this instance Qatar, should have proper processes in place to check the kind of recruitment processes that are in place, because a lot of the time I think what happens is that there's a lot of corruption within the recruitment agencies. People there are also cases of trafficking that happen. People really don't know what they are getting into. They're promised a very good job and they go to another country and they realize that they're not getting what they really want. So I think it is sad that India as a country has not really responded. It should. I would say that the Indian External Affairs Ministry and the Overseas Affairs Ministry should definitely step into this. They should speak on behalf of our laborers in Qatar who have been dying in large numbers. But I think it should equally be the responsibility of the host country, because they are contributing to the economy. They don't have the labor in their own country, and that's why so many people migrate from India, from Nepal, from Bangladesh, from all these South Asian countries. So the host country should also take up the responsibility.
Okay, so talking about the host country, let's go to Vani Saraswati, who joins us from Doha. Vani, thanks so much for joining us. Your take on this whole story of, the number of people from India, the laborers dying, just seems to be, getting higher and higher.
First, I'd like to say that Indians make up a quarter of the population in Qatar. So let's look at it from that perspective.
Okay.
And also the fact that we really don't know the reasons for these deaths. I'm sure many of these deaths are due to bad HSE practices, but the fact is there's no record. We have to look into that. Neither the Indian embassy here nor the government is able to provide us the exact reasons why these deaths occur. So I don't think it's wise to just hang on to this number when we don't know the reasons for death. But there is a real issue of how low-income migrant workers are treated here. There is a problem with how all migrants are treated here as well. And we need to look at that. India needs to probably put more pressure on Qatar to clean up its act. It had an opportunity at the recent UPR, the UN and the Universal Periodic Review of Qatar. And India really basically didn't raise any issues. Though many of the European countries raised issues of labor abuse in Qatar, India kept quiet. At the UPR in UN, this was last month, early May. These numbers, these statistics are probably worrying, but keep in mind there's I think about 400 to 500,000 Indians living in Qatar. So you have to look at the rates from that perspective too.
Yeah, but
Akash,
Vani, but just the other point, that the International Trade Union Confederation has said that almost up to 4,000 workers can die, before everything is ready for the World Cup in 2022. And the other...
Right. Actually, I'm trying to figure out from where they're pulling out these statistics.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a lot of bad things that are going to happen before the World Cup in 2022. But these numbers, where are they coming from? What are they calculating it on? Because that isn't clear.
Yeah, the other issue also has been the fact that, yeah, Vani, can you hear us?
I can. I just want to say I'm not defending Qatar's abuse of labor in any way. I'm not. I just have a problem with the way the statistics are being played around with.
Okay, but okay, fine, fair enough.
If I can step in a bit here,
sure.
there was a study commissioned by DLA Piper recently, an agency, which came up with some analysis of the deaths and went into the causes. And the highest number of deaths were caused by cardiac arrest. That was cited as one of the reasons. And in fact, there were several other causes that were shown. For example, falling from a height, the construction workers, they slip and fall. So that shows that there is poor, safety measures for workers on the work sites or the construction sites. Also, there are a large number of cases of suicides of workers as well. So I'm sure there are psychological issues, migrants, they are away from home, they may be, there's so much pressure on you, you need to send money back home. There are these humanitarian aspects of, that need to, that I think both the host country and the country from which the migration is taking place, in this case India, both countries need to invest some effort into, as she rightly said, that we still, though you have some studies available, I think you need to go into the reasons, and actually conduct a survey among workers. There has to be a concrete effort to understand. Maybe you should have a mental health counselor or something like that, who the workers can talk to. They may be going through all kinds of pressures. So I think these, so there have been some efforts to do studies, but I agree that it's not been as elaborate as it should.
Okay,
perhaps be.
Yeah, I think Vani wants to say something.
Yeah, if I can add one more thing, the role that the Indian missions play in the Gulf countries, I'm not talking just about Qatar, I'm talking about all the GCC countries. They are just looking at, if a worker goes with a complaint, their main intention is to send them back. They're not looking at the issue and trying to really engage in a dialogue with the government here to resolve things. This is something that the Indian government has to focus on. It needs to stop behaving like a victim. It's a powerful country after all. They should exercise that power.
Yeah, sadly, we seem to be pretty, not sensitized to the issue. We've also got someone joining us on Hangout. It's yeah. Hello. Is that, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us in the conversation. Your views on this entire, labor issues as far as Qatar is concerned.
Right. Well, I certainly don't think you're aware of identity on Google Hangout. My name is Shabri Nair. I'm with the Swiss Development Agency, a global migration development expert.
Okay, Shabri. Yeah. You're joining us from Moldova, right?
That's right. I'm in Moldova currently. It's good to see someone and hear someone like Vani, who I met very recently in Stockholm, where we had the Global Forum on Migration and Development. A number of these issues did come out even there, both during the civil society discussions and during the government discussions. So we need to constantly keep that link in mind, how the national perspective is involved, and how that translates to the global dialogue and the global policy discussions and vice versa. But just to come back to the issue at hand, certainly this is a priority topic. This is timely, and it's important that we're having this discussion with the new government, with the Modi government in power now. It's good to hear about the steps that the Modi government is taking. Let's say, I think it was Ms. Venkat who's in the studio, I heard her talk about how the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs should work together with foreign affairs and, to take these steps forward. Let's not forget, if I'm not mistaken, looking at policy coherence for development in the issue in India with regards to the ministers that we have. Overseas Indian affairs has now been collapsed to foreign affairs, or rather, foreign affairs takes the responsibility for overseas Indians. So now here we've got a much more direct a sense of responsibility that has come under foreign affairs. So from a government perspective, it's important to know that the channel of discussion between the sending and the country of destination is now much more close, let's say, because there's no conflict internally within the ministries in India. I just want to also make a point to the effect that India is a sending country, India is also a receiving country. So when we talk about governments like India taking a position with regards to, let's say, Indian migrant workers in Qatar, the question that will immediately be brought back is, well, how are Bangladeshi or Nepali or Sri Lankan workers treated in India? Yeah. So while we keep this debate going and we keep this discussion on the burner, let's not forget about India's role as a destination country, which means now suddenly the government of India has to play a role that equates to both levels. Something that we need to keep in mind. Protection of workers is important not just for India but also for Nepali migrants, Bangladeshi migrants who are in Qatar or elsewhere in the Gulf. So it's a regional issue. If one country alone decides to do something, then you may not get as much an impact as it could be done more on a regional level. Okay. So let's see what what momentum we can take forward in processes like the Colombo process or the Abu Dhabi dialogue. Now, these are all important processes. They're not the most effective processes, but the Colombo is a combination of countries coming together in Asia. There are about 11 countries that are members of this process. Let's understand where the competition is between these countries. Let these countries be ready to share. That's the sending countries. Them be ready to share information with each other and take a joint and a united stand. I guess then you will be able to justify your case much more strongly with the destination countries.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that Shabrinath is trying to make.
Yes. In fact, in response to Shabri, I'm glad that he talked about India's important role as a destination country for migrants. But I would like to point out to him that the Indian government treats its elite migrants, the so-called diaspora, you have this elaborate Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, and you have these ceremonies to celebrate successful elite like overseas Indians, NRIs and stuff like that. But when it comes to ordinary laborers, going from from Kerala, from Bihar, or states like these and working in Gulf countries and stuff, the government is not really showing the same level of concern or involvement. And that is why I think, while I buy your argument, I mean, I am completely with you when you say that India has a responsibility towards migrants coming from other countries. I think there is this bias, there is this class bias. There's this class bias that definitely needs to be addressed, and the Indian government needs to be equally sensitive to the problems that the laborers are facing in countries like Qatar. And I think right now, because Qatar is at the the center of attention because of the FIFA World Cup in 2022, I think we need to make use of this attention right now. The spotlight is not always on these issues. So I think while the spotlight is there on these issues, let us get something done. Let us achieve something concrete so that sets the precedent to address issues of this sort.
Okay, I'll bring in Vani into the conversation. I know, Vani, you're running short of time, but we'll just ask you a couple of quick questions. Firstly, the point that Shabri was trying to make of putting up a united front when it comes to issues like these. If we have countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, and our neighboring countries coming together. And the second point that Vidya is trying to make is the fact that right now the spotlight is on Qatar. Do you think at this point of time, if there is a joint calibrated effort, Can we see, some movement forward on this issue?
Definitely, I think Shabri is right. There is a need, and that is a way forward. And before we put up a joint front as sending countries, we should also be aware of the other role India plays. A lot of migration of Nepalis as well happens through India because very often they can't exit from their own home due to the laws in place there. So they take the long route out, uh, basically become undocumented through India, and
Yeah.
they come to the Gulf through one of the Indian airports. Now, this is something that I think India has a role to play. This is where they have to work closer with the Nepali government to see how they can stop that. That is one point. The other, about forming a united front, it definitely will not be taken very well by the GCC countries because they could also form a united front.
Okay.
But that shouldn't stop us from doing it at all. Before we take that step, I think we need to empower our missions here, individual missions, because honestly, the Philippines embassy here, or even the Nepali embassy, I think they are a little more proactive in terms of protecting the rights of their citizens in the Gulf than the Indian government.
Exactly, yeah.
Because as Vidya pointed out, there is also the class bias. There are Indians who are doing extremely well in the Gulf, and they probably have access to, they are the ones who really enjoy the lack of taxes and things like that. It doesn't affect the laborer at all. And the fact that the entire population, of Indian immigrants are disenfranchised. We can't vote. So this is another thing. These are things that probably don't really affect those of a higher income. But I do believe if there is a large number of people coming from certain villages in Kerala and certain villages in Andhra and Tamil Nadu, if they did have the right to vote, if they had a right to remotely vote, I'm sure their MPs would take up their cause much stronger in the parliament. At this point, they're not a vote bank. It's easy to ignore their thing. So yes, we should form. We should have probably been at the GFMD as a group. We were not. Nepal, Bangladesh was represented. Philippines, nobody from India came. Someone from the mission in Europe. So we should, in these forums, we should go as a group. But also, I think the missions individual missions have a role to play, and the Indian mission is failing here.
Okay, so with your comment.
May I?
Yeah. Please, Shabri, go ahead.
I'm totally in agreement with what Barney is saying. Look, I work with the government, and the way government functions is much different from the way civil society functions. And here we've got individuals like Vidya, Barney, and I know that some of the other friends of ours, civil society experts like Akash and Nikhil, who are supposed to be on, they're working so hard, and it's important, but it functions differently from the way governments perceive and approach these things. It cannot be a finger-pointing issue. See, Vani makes a very good point with regards to if we take a joint position, we as in the South Asian countries take a joint position, then that's exactly how the Gulf countries will do. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Let them take a joint position because, all of this, if we look at some of the root issues stem from the so-called kafala system. Now, a lot of civil society organizations I know talk about uprooting the kafala system, saying we need to take it off, abolish the kafala system. Now, that's difficult. It's a much more intrinsic and a much more difficult debate. We need to keep in mind that this goes back centuries and millennia. So keeping that in mind, we take it step by step. What are the important things that we need? Look, I'll give you an example. Right now, I think recently, 2 weeks back in Vani or Vidya, you may have more information on this. Is what we've heard with working within the government system is to hear that the Qatari government has now permitted for bank accounts, irrespective of the working class, whether you're a high-skilled worker or a low-skilled worker, a construction laborer, no matter where, you should have your salaries should be transferred to the bank account directly. Now that is a good step. That's a good first important step, right? You cannot expect an overnight change. These are changes that will happen slowly. but should be keep it from all sides. But we cannot have a finger pointing. So to the issue of is Qatar now the right? Is it now the right time for us to lobby and work with Qatar? I say yes. But is it a time to put pressure on Qatar? Maybe not. Any government will collapse under pressure and maybe even take 2 steps backward. So we need to understand that these things have to go through the process that is set up. We don't want to do it in such a way that we harm the cause that we are working for.
Okay, so Vidya, I think the point is that we need to have a more pragmatic approach to these things. But what Shabri is saying, what's the harm if it's a pressure group? Because then if the Gulf countries get together, they'll help improve working conditions for people here back in India, and vice versa when they go abroad.
It's all well and good. It's easier said than done, to be honest. But like I said in the beginning, I think the focus has to be on the recruitment agencies, because that is the source where the problem begins. Mostly what happens is that a lot of the recruitment happens in an unlicensed, in a very informal kind of a setup where, even the Nepal case, there was a case of a person by the name Ganesh, I forget the second name, a person by the name Ganesh who died recently, and his story was flashed across the international media. And if you notice, he was from Nepal, and there was no proper licensing for the agency that did the recruitment, or there were some issues like that were discussed. And I think so that has to be the first point, where the work has to begin. You have to identify who are these people, who are these agents who do recruitment, what is the process. You have to have proper licensing. The government, the source country, for example, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, in their countries, you need to begin that process whereby you identify agents, you have a proper listing of them, you blacklist agents who don't have a proper whose reputation is not good, or who are not doing the work properly. And I think in a systematic way, if you can do this, if we can use this the spotlight on Qatar right now to actually start looking at cracking down on agencies that do recruitment illegally and don't adhere to proper processes, I think workers would benefit immensely, I think, if you start there.
Okay, so we've got Akash Jayaprakash joining us from Geneva. He's a migration and human rights specialist. Akash, thanks so much for joining in the conversation. Your views, as far as this whole issue is concerned about, labor rights and issues in Qatar.
Well, I first of all, I managed to miss most of what happened earlier, so I don't want to repeat a lot of what's been said. But just catching it on the back end of what was just said, I think it's very important what was just raised by Vidya, that of the recruiting agencies, and because that's something that I had been working on extensively. Let's look at the facts here. Let's look at Indian legislation. The Immigration Act of India, what governs outward migration, was passed in 1983. It's been 31 years since that document has been passed, and there is no collaboration between the laws of India with the laws of the other sending countries, and at the end of the day, the laws of the countries of destination. Whereas in Qatar, the law says that no recruiting agency is allowed to receive recruitment fees. The Indian law permits agency to receive an amount of up to 20,000 rupees. Or 1 month's salary, but the ceiling is 20,000 rupees. So why? So it's a hard situation to fix once the money has exchanged hands between the workers to the agency, and then they arrive into Qatar, paid far higher than 20,000, and they're in a situation where indebted, and even if they are exploited, it's a really difficult choice that they have to make in leaving that job.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Further to that, I think India needs to be brave and make some really difficult decisions, because India is the world's largest remittance receiving country. You have billions of dollars coming in from migrants all over the world, but the role of the missions and the countries of destination need to be better highlighted. The Ministry of External Affairs with MOIA, and hopefully with the new government with Sushma Swaraj, she had publicly stated that this is an issue that she takes very personally, and she wants to hear more about how the Indian migrants are doing abroad, because she understands, yes, that there are diaspora who are in far better circumstances than their brethren in the Gulf. But again, a lot of this has been stated for decades, and I would be more convinced once we actually see substantial action. A very important thing is a very seriously important issue to consider is the role of Indian migrants having the ability to vote. While factually it's true that I am an NRI myself, I've been living in Qatar my whole life, and I was born there, but I'm an Indian citizen. And I do want to vote. I care about my government. I want to know. I want to have a say in how things are run in my country. But the fact is, if I want to vote, I have to go back to Kerala, register in my panchayat in the district, get my elector's ID card. Only then I'm allowed to vote. So that would mean I had to fly back every 5 years or whenever if I need to vote or anything. Which is just so disenfranchising. And how are we as migrants in the Gulf who care about our country back home? How do we get involved in these issues?
Yeah, but you know
where's the impetus? Yes.
Yeah, Akash, the other thing I wanted to ask you that, I mean, let's say that, the government of India does half the things that Vidya has been saying, that we improve, the processes back here. But do you see any change in the mindset or the psychology of the Qatar government when it comes to these issues, especially the system where they follow, where everything is in the hands of the employer?
Well, okay, yes, I do. I work on these issues in Qatar. I'm based in Qatar. I'm here in the UN to attend the Human Rights Council and whatnot. So I have a very good understanding of how the government functions, and I think that there is a lot of political will from the very top into addressing these issues. This is true. The problem lies in the actual implementation and the trickle down effect of what the people at the top say and how those ideas are played out in action. For example, if you look at just the laws, the labor laws and the sponsorship law, also known as the kafala system, you would see that it has pretty strict rules. It has pretty tight legislation in terms of protection. The problem is the enforcement. If the enforcement was pretty effective, a lot of the situation wouldn't be there. Another important element to address here is also the fact that domestic workers are a very big part who are not included in the labor law legislation. So while it is unethical, it is inhumane, it is immoral to not pay your worker and not give them a day off, it's not illegal for domestic workers in Qatar. So those are some other more important issues that address not just Indian migrants, but all migrants from everywhere in the country. So I think it remains to be seen what steps the government will actively take, but they have a very good opportunity right now to actually address these issues.
Okay, Akash, I mean, your final views as far as the expectations you have from the new government back here in India.
My final views, well, I think after any election, any large general election is over, you'd have the government at a height of its popularity and very, committed to issues. I think a year from now is when you will be able to look back and see how successful they are. So I don't want to make assessments too early. I'm glad that they're going for a more economical and smaller governments and having one ministers with multiple portfolios, which makes sense. But it remains to be seen because, to me, action speaks louder than words. For starters, let's think of reviewing the Immigration Act, 1983. It's been 31 years. Another one is the bilateral agreement India signed with Qatar in the 80s. For example, it's the Indians in Qatar, doctors, as per the bilateral agreement, need to get about 3,000 or 4,000 riyals, and that's okay because that has been the recommended wages the bilateral agreement set. There hasn't been a provision for reviewing those figures or looking at inflation and the usual pay rises. Things like that. I mean, let's see the action. Let's see what they're saying good things now. I would like to look at this issue a year from now and see what they've done. Okay,
Akash. So Akash doesn't seem to be too much of an optimist. He believes in action. But Vidya, coming back to the points that he's been raising, I mean, do you see this? I mean, is there an urgent need to review the two issues that you mentioned as far as Qatar is concerned? Do we need to review those acts?
Definitely that should be done, but like I have been saying, I mean, I will stick to my familiar territory, and I'll only talk about what I know well. That you have the statistics in front of you. I mean, the official figures confirmed by the Indian Embassy in Doha reveal that 237 Indians working in Qatar have died in 2012, 241 in 2013, and 24 this year in January. So you have numbers the government has its task cut out, and you have a new government in place. So I think they just need to get started. I mean, they just need to do what needs to be done. And like I said earlier, I mean, India as the source country for the labor definitely needs to review the processes at its own, in its own soil. Where are people, conduct a small survey, find out which are the states from which there are more laborers. Go identify. I mean, if the government wants to do it, they can definitely do it, and I think now is the time to act. So I would stay focused on what I have said earlier, and I think this is what my take would be.
Okay, we've also got Nikhil joining us from Bangalore. He's a researcher and he's done a lot of work on migrant workers in the Gulf for Amnesty International India. Nikhil, thanks so much for joining in the conversation. We're at the last leg of our conversation and we've been discussing a lot of things, and what seems to have come out is a lot of issues need to be reviewed in a pragmatic manner. What is your take?
See, I think, when we're talking about the deaths of Indian migrants in Qatar, Amnesty India has been calling for much more transparency from the Indian government to say, because the government's been saying that these deaths are normal, and these numbers are not something that's all from mark. But the government needs to be very, very clear on who these people were, where they were employed, whether they died on construction sites or labor camps or on road accidents or of natural causes. So I think when it comes to the question of the deaths of Indian citizens in Qatar, it should actually come out in the open to say, this is the information, this is the data, and then take action on it. There are responsibilities that lie with the Indian government, with the Indian mission, with how India does its recruitment. Akash was talking about the Immigration Act, but there are significant responsibilities of the government of Qatar as well. And there are a range of things that need to be done, and I think for starters, the Indian government needs to be more transparent on the number of Indian deaths in Qatar and other Gulf countries.
But we had Vani on the show earlier, Vani Saraswati, managing editor of Just Here Qatar from Doha, and
still here.
Oh, she's still there. So she was. I was talking to Nikhil. Vani was making that point that why are we making such a big deal about it? Because we have so many Indians who are working there already. So I mean, is it misplaced fear?
No, I think accounts of when you have so many construction workers working in a foreign country like Qatar, that they are a large number of them are employed in construction. You have other information like research from Doha. I mean, Doha's main hospitals talk about lots of trauma injuries as a result of people falling from height or things falling on them. So I think it's important that if there is information that talks about serious labor abuse in Qatar, that you actually follow it up. I think the question of protecting migrant workers happens regardless of the number of workers that are employed, the amount of remittances that they bring. I think that's where we're coming from.
Yeah. Okay, Nikhil. I mean, your final comments. How do you see this thing moving forward? I mean, no one wants to have a relationship in another country where you rub each other the wrong way. So what's the way forward?
See, I think the government of Qatar recently commissioned a report which had several recommendations. So one of them would be to actually enforce that actively. So one of the recommendations that came out was investigate deaths as a result of cardiac arrest. Now, if the government commissioned report is actually saying that, then the government of Qatar should implement it. On the India side, so that is on the Qatar the Qatar side.
Yeah.
On the Indian aspect, you need to enforce the Immigration Act. The Immigration Act is a weak legislation, but regardless, I mean, there should be a better mechanism to regulate recruitment companies. Workers must be provided pre-departure training. When things go wrong, workers must have access to justice. Migrant workers, they bring in $70 billion to India. I mean, the largest receiver of remittances. I mean, it's high time with the new government that we stand up to protect migrant rights. And I think And I think there's a range of different things on legislation and enforcement that the Indian government needs to do here.
Okay, Nikhil. Thanks so much for joining in the conversation. We'd love to have you on more conversations on India Post Live. So, Vidya, coming back to you, a lot of stuff that you said seems to be echoing around, you know. I mean, right from investigating deaths to enforcing the Immigration Act.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We've got Vani back. Vani, thanks so much for patiently being with us in the conversation. Your final comments?
I just want to clarify, I didn't say the numbers were no big deal. I just said it hasn't been investigated properly.
Okay.
So we don't know what the cost was. The other thing that we have to look into is the access to healthcare for laborers here is quite limited.
Yeah.
You know, there is segregation even in access to healthcare. And there's just one hospital catering to them near the industrial area clinic. So these are the things that governments have to look into.
Okay. Thanks so much, Vani. Thanks so much for joining in the conversation. We'll go back
May I
to...
quickly come in?
Yes, of course, Shabri. The conversation will be incomplete without your final views.
Oh my! No, thank you very much. Look, I more as a as comments from my side, having working from a government side with another government. Nikhil pointed out a very important figure: $72 billion, over $70 billion in remittances. Now, that's just the financial remittances. Huh? There's also the social remittances that migrant workers anywhere in the world send back to their country of origin, whether it's in the terms of knowledge, it's in terms of skills, it's in terms of issues pertaining to community building in their countries of origin. So $32 billion, a very important point. But how much of that contributes to the GDP of India? 3 to 4%. So the point here is, when we say that the government needs to take action, we need to understand where the government's priorities lie. Yeah? I'm not saying that this is something that we need to totally put away. No, I work on migration and development issues, and certainly very important, it is protection for development. So let's not forget that governments have priorities, and this should figure in the overall agenda. So when India discusses trade with governments like Qatar, then India should bring in the Migration Act. So you should mainstream migration in the entire national development agenda. Only then can you have a better understanding of what it is that countries like India wants, and how countries like Qatar can respond to those needs of the sending countries. A second point is, let's not have far-flung ideas. Let's start simple, but let's start effective, which is, one, what exactly do we need? We need better living conditions for migrant workers anywhere in the Gulf or anywhere, migrant workers anywhere, better living conditions. What else do we need? Better salaries, or proper salaries that are fair wages. These are some of the issues that we need to put forward. We need better contracts that have are better implemented between the two countries and the migrant worker itself. And a last point, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has recently stated that they would discuss with members of parliament at the local level, and certainly I think one of the other friends also brought this up. In Kerala, as an example, we've got NORCA. NORCA is a good institution that has constantly been pushing for the rights of migrant workers from Kerala in the Gulf. Let's start at the local level and then put the pressure at the national level in New Delhi to take it forward with the country of destination.
Okay, so Shabri, thanks so much for your inputs. We'd love to have you on our conversations later. Nikhil, thanks so much for joining in the conversation. And with you too. So there you heard from our experts. We don't need grand ideas. We need simple but effective ways, as what our panelists have said, that we can start small but do it in effective ways, so that we can somehow bring these issues into the mainstream and then address them when we have bilateral talks. So you can also join in the conversation and participate in these conversations by logging on to our site, indiapostlive.com, and you can send us your feedback. Our Twitter handle is @IndiaPostLive. Many more conversations will continue in India Post Live. Thanks so much for watching.